Sheena Ansari, she never even reviewed the evidence before sending agents to my home. 3 heavily armed U.S. Marshals show up to my home like I'm some type of drug dealer. Bulletproof vests, rifles, everything. They were probably hoping that, facing 10 years in prison would be enough to get me to plead.
For 4 HIPAA violations?
I find out her brother's name is Ali Ansari. He owns a coffee company. Who does he have business with? Hospitals under the TCH Baylor Academic Consortium. The judge wants to silence me so he doesn't deny the gag order. He just leaves it as an open threat, but doesn't define what similar conduct it was. And by this point, we were $1 million in legal debt. We had no option to appeal it. We had nothing we can do legally. So for the next month and a half, I'm effectively silenced.
Welcome to American Whistleblower. We're here with somebody that I've been dying to talk to. Eithan, the first thing I want to ask you, it's not Eithan. I mean, as I see it, it's Eithan Haim, but how would you pronounce it?
Yeah, Eithan Haim.
Eithan Haim?
Yep, it's a
spiritual warrior.
What was that?
Spiritual warrior.
Yeah,
for life, yeah. Right? Eithan is a warrior, a spirit warfare.
Yeah, it means strong and powerful, and then last name means life.
Life, yeah. So, are you Israeli or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. You were born in Israel.
Yeah. Well, my dad was born in Israel. My mom is German.
Okay. That's funny. I've been criticized by actually Jewish lawyers in the United States, strangely enough, because I work with a lot of plaintiff firms, and they'll say, that Israeli flag behind you has just got to go. It just has to go. It's going to, it's gonna drive people away. And I'm like, good, that's the people.
Yeah, fly it proud, my friend.
Yeah, and the funniest thing, when you do things the right way and you live according to your principles, as you do, by the way, God bless the work you do. Some of the biggest cases that I've handled or handling have to do with this flag I put up. It's crazy. There's a fellow who runs a huge laboratory, and he's testing generic drugs, and he was whistleblower in a big case, and he was the one responsible for getting this Zantac pulled off the market. And I'd never met him before, and we were talking, and he didn't say a word. Then I go out to see him up in Connecticut, and he says, before we start, I just want to say thank you. I'm going, thank you for what? And he says, I'm Israeli. And then I knew right away, right? And then I've got this other client. It's like a multiple $billion scheme that they were blowing the whistle on. And we're talking to the clients, and the wife sees me for the first time, and she screams, he's the one. We finally found the one. And I'm going, why? What? And she says, I'm Israeli, she says. So literally in the course of 4 to 5 months, more than a year, I've gotten all of these really great results just from putting up the flag that everybody told me not to put up. Just absolutely incredible. But you're from Texas, originally born in Texas or born in Israel? Where were you born?
I was born in New York. My parents first moved here in 1987 from Israel. Yeah, my mom, she's German Christian, and she moved to Israel when she was maybe 20 years old. And she was a nurse there. That's when she met my dad. They got married in Tel Aviv on the Hilton in right on the beach there. And then they came over to New York City in 1987. They had my brother in 88, and then me, I was born in 1990. But we only lived in New York for a year. We moved to Philadelphia, then Mississippi, and then Florida. So I grew
up in New York?
Long Island.
But Long Island, and then you lived in Philly?
Yeah.
So what does your dad do, could I ask?
Yeah, he's a doctor. He did his training at St. Luke's Roosevelt in New York in internal medicine. And then he did his fellowship at Temple. And then because he was still working under a green card, he worked in a rural area in Tupelo, Mississippi. And,
Tupelo, okay. I've been there.
Yeah. It's where Elvis was born.
I've been to Elvis's house. Who hasn't?
Yeah. And then, so then we moved to Florida when I was maybe in second grade. So I consider myself like a native Floridian.
So you're a Floridian. Now, where in Florida are you folks from?
Or Orlando.
Orlando, beautiful. Ah,
Yeah.
that's a great town. So you went to med school in Florida, I think. Is that
Mhm.
true?
Yep. Florida Atlantic and Boca Raton.
In Boca. And where did you do your training, your surgical training?
Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas.
Oh, beautiful
Yeah, so
place.
it was a big, because Boca, it's like the heaven's waiting room for your old Jewish people, right? You know how it is,
I do know.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a pipeline from New York to Boca Raton. And yeah, so, I worked my ass off in medical school, graduated at the top of my class and then was,
You were AOA, right?
yeah, AOA and then the Gold Human.
For those who don't know, that's Alpha Omega Alpha. That's the top 1% or 2% of the class.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
You're
Yeah,
pretty nice for an AOA. You're a pretty decent guy for an AOA.
yeah, yeah. Usually it's like these crazy guys.
Usually a bunch of jerks. Yeah, like
Yeah.
nobody wanted it like the AOA guys.
No, I was
So
great.
you're super smart, and dad's a surgeon. What kind of surgeon is your father?
No, he's a pulmonary critical care.
Oh, pulmonary critical care. Okay. And you did general surgery, or did you subspecialize?
No, just general surgery. I worked
Okay.
in a small town, so
Yeah.
we do pretty much everything. Robotic.
Yeah,
arms,
that's the nice
upper-
part about working in a small town. You get
Oh, yeah.
so you love the OR, right?
Yeah, yeah, great.
All right. So how do you end up in Houston? So tell me your story. Like how for people who don't know, you're responsible for blowing the whistle for lack of, I never liked that term, by the way. It's just, you came forward because the hospital you were working in the hospital was performing gender-affirming surgeries on minors. And I hate the term gender-affirming. There's nothing affirming about what they do. And Texas law said that they're not supposed to. They were that's what the fascinating part about your story. Well, first, the fact that you came forward is wonderful, but how does a hospital expect to hide a program? That's unbelievable to me. Like, how do you expect to get away with that? I mean, that's just shocking to me.
Yeah, and so I was when I was in medical school. Baylor is one of the best surgical training programs in the country, right?
Oh, it's top rate.
Yeah, that's where Michael DeBakey was at. Cooley, who is one of the most
Well,
famous
the
heart
DeBakey
surgeons.
Heart Center is at Methodist Hospital.
Oh, now it's at St. Luke's, which is where I trained.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked under all of his proteges, who are all of them total psychopaths.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with your surgeon being a psychopath as long as he's a good surgeon. Yeah.
No, we got good training, and then but I was able to go through. I started my training in 2018 at Baylor College of Medicine, and then I was able to see how the entire profession had just descended into collective madness during COVID in 2020. With the masks, with the mRNA jabs, with the lockdowns, and it's like the world around me had just completely devolved into madness.
Yeah, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. And they say follow the science, and then they end up doing castrations on little boys following the science. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it was only after 2020 that these transgender interventions really started taking off, because I was kind of familiar with it, but I didn't really know about it that much until like 2021, 2022. It was always like this fringe issue. But, I thought it was going on in Washington, New York City, California for sure, but definitely not Houston.
Well, it was a rare thing to do, and it was done on adults, not kids. And the only time you ever did it on a child, if there was a true intersex child, and that's rare in medicine. It's 1 in a million, right?
Very rare, very rare.
Yeah.
And even in those cases, kind of like, the ethics behind it is kind of questionable. Sometimes it's better to like let them grow up and then decide.
100%. 100%. So how does it come about? Your work, tell the story, because I find it so mind-boggling and there's so much to unpack, right? I mean, from an ethics point of view, I guess, you're Jewish. I'm evangelical Christian, but I'm a Jew for Jesus. I came to the Lord in a Jewish congregation, so we you do the Hebrew prayers. We do all of it. I've been doing a Seder in my house for 30 years. Yeah. So I always find that I'm really fascinated. Like, I want to hear your motivation. I mean, beyond just the obvious as a medical doc, because there's a lot of medical docs that are okay with it. And I think that's insane. How any medical doctor, no matter what your religious belief is or isn't, how you can think that it's okay to transgender a minor is just beyond belief, beyond belief.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, seeing everything that happened during COVID, like my soul was crushed, right? Because I tried to fight back against it, but there's only so much I can do at a certain point. But then this thing happens where, all of a sudden in mid 2022, one of my co-residents comes up to me. He's like, Eithan, like, listen to this. I just implanted this puberty blocker in this 11-year-old, who believes that she's a boy, who, wants to have more surgery, who is definitely sure she never wants to have children, whose whole family is transgender. Right. And, the immediate red flag is, holy crap, this kid's being abused by his parents. Right.
They're all out of their minds. Right. Just because,
Yeah.
right. 11 years old. How do you let that happen?
Yeah. And, it was one of those things it was hard to believe. Right. Like, I didn't think that TCH, which is the biggest children's hospital in the world, right, one of the most prestigious. And I spent a lot of time working there. This is affiliated with Baylor College of Medicine. So we would spend a huge amount of time working there. I didn't believe that they would do something like this. But then over the next couple of months, May, June, July, right, I start hearing this story more and more from other residents who are telling me that they're implanting these puberty blocking devices in children.
And the only reason you found out because they would call general surgery to do the implants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise than that, you wouldn't have known.
Yeah. So like I had done these implants before, but on children with precocious puberty, which is like a well-defined endocrine disorder in younger children who are like 7, 8 years old.
Puberty, for the people who don't know, is just when a child hits puberty abnormally early, and it has all negative effects on a person, and you want to slow that process down. So you will block the puberty from advancing, and then you monitor the child, and then you back up on that procedure until finally you allow them to then. And is that usually puberty blockers are mostly on male or female patients, boys or girls?
For the precocious puberty, I'm not sure, but for the transgender interventions, it was kind of a mix of both.
Yeah. Okay. So they're calling the surgical staff to put these implants in, and what department is overseeing this? Like, what in the hospital? Who's overseeing all this?
Yeah, the Texas Children's Hospital Department of Surgery, which is really important because the main witness in the case, right, that had manufactured all this evidence against me was what I believe manufactured all this evidence against me was the chief of TCH's surgery, Larry Ollier. But I'll get into that in a little bit. But so it's like I don't really believe that I didn't believe that this was like a thing, right? It was just too crazy. I tell my wife though. My wife actually, because she's a lawyer, she was actually a DOJ prosecutor.
Your wife was a DOJ prosecutor. What was can I ask your wife's name?
Andrea Haim.
Andrea Haim. And where is she a DOJ?
In the Northern District of Texas. She was in the healthcare fraud, which is,
Oh,
ironic.
Probably come across her at one point. No, I've been 30 years in this space, so I've dealt with a lot of U.S. attorneys all over the country. Is she still at DOJ?
No, she took the deferred resignation because of the 5-day work week thing.
Sure. Okay,
we just had our first baby too. So
Mazel tov. What's boy or girl?
Girl. Her name is Talia.
Talia?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a beautiful name. Little baby girl. When was Talia born?
Yeah, in September of last year. So like my wife had an emergency C-section. I had to leave 2 hours after the baby was born to go to court. It was awful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So wait, when does all this happen? Let's put a time frame to all this. Like, when do you first hear about the puberty blockers being implanted?
Yeah, in 2022, and that's when I found out. So TCH had released a statement earlier that year in March of 2022 that said that they're shutting down the transgender program because of the potential criminal legal ramifications. And that last part's important. They said potential criminal legal ramifications, and they released this statement out to all these different news organizations in Houston. The reason they released that statement is because a few weeks earlier, the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, had issued an opinion saying that these interventions could constitute criminal child abuse. So what I find out in, later that year in 2022 is that, oh no, like they didn't stop this program. They just expanded it into like a multidisciplinary clinic.
Now, when did the law pass in Texas, or had the law always been? Like, tell me about the Ken Paxton of the law.
So that's a really interesting part of the story because I decided to blow the whistle in January of 2023 because that's
January 23, and they made their announcement March of 22.
Yep. Yeah.
When did you find out about it?
In probably like May, June 2022.
May of 22.
Yeah. So after that statement, after the statement was made, I didn't
so
even
May
know
of 22, but then it takes you, it's almost 7 months before you actually blow the whistle.
Well, until I decided I would blow the whistle, it took me another 5 months to get a hold of a journalist because journalists just didn't believe the story, or they thought it was too explosive to take it.
Yeah, it's I can't fault you, and I know how hard it is to engage with journalists. I've got a couple of cases now that we're working with some journalists, and but I got to tell you, I never met Ken Paxton, but I'm impressed. Like, we have a case now where the AG is going to take the case, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he's running for Senate now, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so he's your advocate, I guess.
Yeah, and so he plays a big part of this story. So after 5 months, I spent 5 months trying to reach out to journalists.
Wait, so it's January 23. You start the process, or that's when you start?
That's really when I started in earnest.
Okay, and then sometime, I guess, around June, you get some traction?
May of 2023.
May of 23. So who's the first journalist that sort of takes you seriously, or not takes you seriously, but actually engages with you? They probably all believed you, but nobody wanted to write the story.
Yeah. And, I don't want to name any of them just because, it's
I get it.
But the journalist who ended up telling the story was Christopher Rufo on May 16th, 2023.
Rufo.
Yep.
Okay. And May, what day?
And the story comes out with me as the anonymous whistleblower on May 16th.
May 16th. And then it all hits the fan, as they say.
Yeah. And, for me, it didn't really hit the fan because I was anonymous. No one knew who I was. And then, so I was living these two different
So he
worlds.
wrote a story even though you didn't go on the record?
Oh, I provide documentation.
Yeah. No, I get it. But still, there are a lot of journalists. It depends on the journalist, but, taking on a big institution like that, and depending on who he writes for, some of them would almost not want to do the story unless you went on the record.
Yeah.
So you're pretty lucky like that. All right. So he writes the story, and what happens next?
Yeah. So it's like the story blows up all over the news, right? And no one knew who I was. I was just a random whistleblower. And then, it was perfect timing because one day after the story came out, the Texas Senate votes to pass SB 14, which was a law that would ban these transgender interventions in children.
And that was the day after.
24 hours later, yeah. And the reason it passed with bipartisan support is because of our story the day before. So it's like,
but
timing. It was God. What I believe is God's providence, but like,
amen. Yeah.
I would argue that this is, this has always been illegal, right? But it's like that's a different topic. But yeah, so within 24 hours of our story coming out, it's codified as illegal in the state of Texas, and with bipartisan support. And then on May 19th, right, 2 days after that, that's when the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, initiates an investigation into TCH because of our story. And then on May 23rd, another whistleblower speaks out. This was a nurse who worked firsthand in the transgender clinic. And she witnessed the horror that was going on behind the scenes.
And this whole program is being run under the general surgery department?
No, it's The general surgeon was a product, like a
They were putting in the implants, but there had to be an
yeah.
endocrinologist running this.
Yeah. So it was an endocrinologist and then I think a psychologist who was running it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a multidisciplinary clinic. I mean, primary care, social work, case management.
Did they put a name on the clinic, or was it a
Yeah,
clandestine thing?
no, they had a name on the clinic, but there was no internet presence, which is very atypical for a children's hospital,
No
right? So,
kidding. Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
mean, they were concealing it from the public. That's what they were doing.
All right. So Ken Paxton starts his investigation.
Yep, that was May 19th. And then
May
another
19th.
whistleblower speaks out on May 23rd.
Okay. So now you've got corroboration, which is good for you.
Yeah.
Now, does she come out and use her name, or is she just off the record?
She's anonymously initially, but her story becomes intertwined with mine
Of
because
course.
the FBI shows up to her home like 2 months later, and then
So
she gets in touch with us. But I'll tell that part of the story.
right.
later.
So the DOJ jumps in. So the state is all supportive of you. Ken Paxton. I'm assuming Governor Abbott at this point was on your team.
Yeah, I mean, he signed the bill into law, and so within 24
Right, so
hours of
all the normal people, but then along comes the DOJ.
the Biden administration.
Right, a whole different ball of wax, I guess, right?
Yeah. And then on June 23rd, so like a month later, right? They and so at this point, no one knew who I was. I was still anonymous, and I was getting ready to graduate from my surgical training and like start my job, which I'm at now. My wife was about to start her background check for the DOJ. So my graduation from surgical training was June 23rd, 2023, a little bit over a month after the story came out, right?
So June 23rd, 23, you graduate your program.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest days of my life, right? My family's in
Wait,
town.
but your wife was doing the background checks at this point to work in the DOJ?
Yeah, and she was
working.
working.
At the same time, the DOJ was starting an outreach to you through the FBI, I'm assuming.
Yeah, she was actually working at a law firm called Baker Hofstetler in Houston. Yeah, and all the attorneys who had helped kind of manufacture this case, my wife knew because they all worked at Baker Hofstetler, but they never told my wife.
Wow. They realized the two of you, they didn't know who you were because you were anonymous at this point.
Well, no, they must have knew who I was because so the agents came to my home on June 23rd, a few hours before the graduation from surgical training.
FBI agents.
Armed agents with Health and Human Services.
HHS agents.
Yeah.
With
but
weapons.
on June 19th, 4 days before that, right, TCH attorneys with Baker Hofstetler, right? One of them, his name is Gregory Sakin. The other's name is Afshin Davis, who's like the in-house counsel. She's a vice president of TCH.
And who are these people?
They were the TCH's legal counsel. They have a meeting with HHS on June 19th with the guy Larry Ollier, the guy who I believe manufactured this case against me. Yeah,
Texas Children's Hospital, this all blows up in their face. So they have a meeting with HHS. Mm-hmm. What was the meeting about? Just that were they defending what they were doing? They couldn't lie about it at this point.
Well, what Dr. Larry Ollier does is he gives them a bunch of testimony that turned out to be flagrantly incorrect, right, in order to justify this investigation.
Right.
Yeah. And so the two attorneys who were at that meeting that let their client, right, give false information to federal agents, right, Gregory Sakin and Afshin Davis. Gregory Sakin spoke with my wife like a few weeks before that. Because he used to work in the Southern District of Texas. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, they knew.
So these are Baker Hofstetler.
Yes.
Okay.
Hofstetler.
And so what happens at this meeting between TCH and Health and Human Services?
They interviewed Dr. Larry Ollier, the TCH chief of surgery, right?
Okay. And he's the one overseeing the implantations.
Well, he's overseeing the whole department, but even though he
never
never
met that many, I'm just curious. Is this like one or two kids here and there, or is this a large number of children?
Oh, there's a large number of kids. Yeah.
Really?
Dozens. Yeah.
Dozens. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and
So,
these are just dozens who are being taken to the OR. Like, because the kids who can't tolerate the injection in clinic, they have to go to an operating room to be put under general anesthesia.
oh my God.
Yeah, so the kids who like might have autism, who might have psychiatric comorbidities, like they're traumatized, they're being abused by their
How can an
parents.
autistic child form the intent to get a transgender surgery or procedure?
Oh, that's the problem is they can't.
How is that possible?
No, it's not possible. That's
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
why it's wrong.
So, yeah. So go ahead. This is fascinating. So the powers that be are lining up,
Yeah,
federal versus state.
they construct a case against me on
Is
June
that the
19th.
HIPAA violation case?
Yeah, yeah.
So the argument is that the documents you turned over to the press contain specific patient information.
Yeah, which is totally crazy because the information I released was the same as like de-identified hospital data that they release about infectious disease outbreaks,
So it
about
was
incidents,
de-identified patient data.
completely de-identified. Yeah.
Because there is an argument. I mean, we've come across it all the time in our work where if I'm giving HIPAA to a federal agency, HIPAA data to a federal agency for the purpose of a false claims investigation, on one hand, they require under this rule called 9B specificity. So you need specificity. But at the same time, you're not allowed to violate HIPAA. So there's always this push-pull between, do I release patient names? Can I give a patient name to a U.S. attorney's office? Now, in your case, it was to a reporter.
And there were never, and that's an important thing is there were never names.
No
So
names. Okay,
even in
so
the indictment, they took out the language HIPAA protected patient information and just changed it to
right, you could talk about the procedures, the doctors doing it, the professionals who were involved in the clinic, but you just couldn't identify the patients.
yeah, which I would never do. Yeah.
Which, of course, that's okay. So, but he accuses that. So somehow, so what happens when the HHS agents come to your door? Like, what
Yeah,
do
so
they?
they show up like 4 hours before my graduation, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, that's got to be. That's got to
yeah,
be.
and they did it with the intention of intimidating me, right? Like very obviously, and so I kind of freak out, but I knew exactly what was going on, so I invite them into my home. Luckily, my wife comes out and is like, she pulls me aside and she's like, "Yeah, you shouldn't speak with them without an
Yeah, stop
attorney present."
talking. Right.
Thank God for that.
Thank God for your wife.
And so I asked them to leave, but
I should
before they
interview your
leave,
wife.
yeah, they give me a target letter that tells me I'm under federal criminal investigation by the United States Department of Justice, and it was signed by a federal assistant U.S. attorney, Tina Ansari, who's one of the main players in this story.
I saw that. I wrote her name down when I was researching this. She seems to be point man for the DOJ against you.
Yep, point man for TCH and Baylor College of Medicine too.
Yeah, like, all right. So, what happens next? This is fascinating.
Yeah, so that day
What an experience! And then you go to your graduation ceremony, which is supposed to be like one of the best days of your life.
Yeah, and so that there was like this feeling of defiance, right? Like we had to fight back. So both my wife and I were non-smokers, but it seemed like the right time to buy a pack of cigarettes and chain smoke them.
Oh
And
man, yeah. No, don't do that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was one of those moments where it was necessary. And then we drank 2 bottles of champagne, and then we went to our graduation, and then so like we just celebrated, but like knowing that these people were trying to destroy me, right? And then we get in touch with some great attorneys. The lead attorney was Marcella Burke, and then she puts together this great team. And then over the next 6 months, I do everything I can to remain anonymous, right? But then Tina Ansari does everything she can to try to get me to plead to some crime that was never committed. Because on the first call with my attorneys, Tina Ansari tells my attorneys that she never even reviewed the evidence before sending agents to my home, right?
I believe it.
And then even though she never reviewed the evidence, she did enough research to find out my wife had been hired as a federal prosecutor, and then brings up her background check as a threat. So she says, that's when my wife, Andrea, is not going to she's not going to have any trouble unless she continues to become difficult. That's what she
So they
tells my
threatened your
attorney.
wife's job, and your wife had been hired at this point?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so your
She had
wife had
been
been
hired.
hired. On one hand, your wife is going to work for the DOJ.
Hmm.
On the other hand, Tina Ansari is coming after you full guns.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
she didn't bother to read the evidence first. Somebody gave her the marching orders, obviously.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
And then over the next couple of months, I start my job in October, right? And the calls with my
This is
attorney.
October 23 still?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So 4 months after the feds came.
Okay.
My first job is a surgical attending. So, we find out that the feds had got a search warrant, had hacked into my email, my phone, my text messages, my phone calls, everything. We also find out that the feds had leaked my name to activists in the transgender clinic who began defaming me online, right?
Well, I think you have more to fear from them than you do from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah. So and it turns out that they were accusing me of mutilating patients, of sexually abusing patients in clinic
Of
rooms.
course. Yeah. It's
And
just,
the person who was doing this admitted it to an FBI agent. So we found that out in discovery. But then there was one phone call between my attorneys and Tina Ansari in October of 2023 that she tells my attorneys that she's going to take me to a jury trial, even if she's going to lose, even on a technicality. And, I could sense the fear in my attorney's
they
voice.
want to put maximum pain, right? They want to inflict maximum pain.
Yeah. And I could sense the fear in my attorney's voices when they were telling me this, right? And all this is written in a letter to Congress, right? That they
Now,
sent
these
to Congress.
attorneys, I just want to ask for a question. I've been through similar things like this, right? Just so you know. So who's paying for these attorneys at this point?
So just me and my wife. And
So you're paying out of pocket for these lawyers?
yeah, so after a couple months, we had spent every single dollar of our savings, like $300,000.
Yeah, they can run through $300,000 in a weekend if you don't let them. So now you're running out of money. This is like a movie.
If we had ran out of money, we were like,
okay, this is like a movie. You've run out of money. You're being attacked by the Department of Justice with unlimited amounts of money.
Yeah.
Unlimited, right? They can do this forever to people.
Yeah.
And your wife has just started a job at the DOJ. Mm-hmm. And now I guess it comes out to the DOJ that your wife is working as an AUSA, an assistant U.S. attorney. They're coming after you with a gun, pedal to the metal investigation, and you're broke, or you're given $300,000 to lawyers. What happens next? I mean, this is
So we had to make the decision, like
kidding. I mean,
we're very private people, right? Like my wife and I, we didn't even have social media at the time. Like we had a very small friend group. So we're like, all right, well, the feds, they're going to destroy me if I don't do anything.
Yeah,
so,
and they win like 99% of their cases.
Yeah. So
right.
if she's telling me that she's going to take me to a jury trial, I might as well fight back. I might as well go all in. We might as well get ready for this fight if she's going to take me to a jury trial.
That's your name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They're messing with the wrong guy. Look at
you. She knocked on the wrong door, because in January 2024,
God puts you in a place. It's funny in our faith, our congregation in particular, and in the Bible, the scripture, we believe that people get their names for reasons, right?
Yeah.
And, classic example, Moses, right? Moshe, he was to draw out. So remember, he was put in the water and floated down the Nile, and then the Pharaoh's daughter pulled him out of the water. But then he was pulling the Jewish people out of Egypt, right?
Yeah.
So Moshe means to draw out. Mm-hmm. So your name means strength. And God puts you in the very place at the very time. And more importantly, with the right woman next to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's not forget that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it puts the two of you in a point of time where you can make a national story and fight God's fight in a national forum. It doesn't get better than this. I mean, it didn't seem like it at the time, but
yeah, because we were terrified. I mean, it was the scariest. because we that's when we took our story public. I mean, it was the most terrifying thing.
Terrifying. So who took you public? Who was the lawyer who did this?
Christopher Rufo and then Marcella Burke, who's been...
Well, Chris Rufo was the reporter.
Yeah. I go public in a story with him.
All right. So you unveil your name for the first time in, what is this, November at this point?
January 2024.
Oh, so we're into January already. All right. Mm-hmm. So January of 24, Chris Rufo writes the national story, and I guess everyone wants to interview at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
so tell me what happens next.
Yeah. So, I tell the story to everyone who's willing to listen, right? So, I went on Tucker Carlson, Dr. Phil, like all these other people, and Fox News. And it was like, it was the most terrifying time in my life, like Ben Shapiro. And, I tell the story to everyone. And, although in one sense it was like, a weight becomes freed from your shoulders, it's also, terrifying because you also go into purgatory, because the line of communication with Tina all of a sudden was cut off, right? And we don't hear a single thing from Tina Ansari for the next 6 months.
So 6 months go by and you don't hear a thing from the U.S. attorney?
Nope.
Well, they're trying to figure out what to do, because now they were intimidating you in the hopes of keeping you quiet. Mm-hmm. You do just the opposite, because that's what Eithans do. They do just the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a national story. So now they have to reassess, the DOJ has to reassess their position in light of all of this. The best way, look, you're a physician, right? You're a doc. What's the old-fashioned best way to kill an infection?
Yeah, source control.
Just open it up to the sunlight.
Yeah.
Right? Sunlight. Just let it breathe, right? You ever hear that? Just let it breathe.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're letting your story out there, the sunlight. Everybody and their aunt is telling your story. I guess the forces of the world are lining up, good and evil, right? Mm-hmm. What happens next? Do you have lawyers at this point?
Yeah, the same ones.
All right, so they didn't abandon you. They're just running up a bill at this point.
No, and they were actually like, compared to all the work they were doing, because for those few months where it was $300,000, they were getting ready for war, right?
Right, you have to, and that's a $2 million defense.
Yeah,
right
and they and really easily $4 or $5 million with how much we had fought, because we went through 3 different indictments. But so they worked pretty much like half time or less. Like Marcella, the main attorney, she was essentially working for free. Like that's how much she was doing for us. Because
and who was the lead attorney on this? Who?
Marcella Burke.
Marcella Burke?
Mm-hmm.
B-U-R-K?
Irish Catholic, yeah.
B-U-R-K-E.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Marcella Burke, God bless her, she's working to help defend you. You said 3 separate indictments.
Yeah. So
what were the 3?
The first indictment, right? Because I was in purgatory for like the next 6 months, from January to June 2024, not expecting, like not knowing what's going to happen, right? And then all of a sudden, right, on June 4th, 7 a.m., 3 heavily armed U.S. Marshals show up to my home like I'm some type of drug dealer, some type of murderer.
June 4th,
2024.
24.
Yep. And that's when I find out that I'm being indicted on 4 HIPAA-based felonies and face
So 3 U.S.
years.
Marshals.
Yep. 4
HIPAA felonies. Like, you're a surgeon at this point. Your wife is a U.S. attorney, and they show up with guns to do what? What do they think you're going to do?
Bulletproof vests, rifles, everything. And my wife knew one of them. My wife knew one of the guys, because they worked in the same office.
Aren't they embarrassed when they get called to do that kind of thing?
They should be.
No, I understand why they go in 3 at a time, because there's strength in numbers. But they're saying, well, did they arrest you? What did they do?
No, they just gave us the indictment, but they could have given that to my attorneys.
They could have handed that to your lawyer. So were the cameras there? Did they call the media as well when they showed up?
No. They were probably hoping that, facing 10 years in prison would be enough to get me to plead.
10 years for
10 years. Yeah.
For 4 HIPAA violations?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you look at their first indictment, it makes me look like a criminal, right? They saying I had no reason to be a TCH. I wasn't taking care of any patients there. I disclosed all this information, all the typical operationally meaningful language of HIPAA, like all the statutory language. That's what's in there. Of course, New York Times, the Washington Post gets wind of it. But by that point, we had built up a small army of people, right?
Was the New York Times on your side or against you?
Oh, I mean, New York Times is absolute propaganda. I mean, these people
Right, they're against you.
are shameless villains,
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the New York Times, I mean, that's their history, right?
Yeah.
They're all Walter Duranty journalists, But
Okay, so now it's June 4th. You're served the indictment, 4 indictments. What happens next?
So we go to war. Tina Ansari thought most likely that I was going to plead. I was going to be afraid of facing 10 years in prison, but I knew that just made our resolution that much more firm because we decided to fight back. And it only took my attorneys a few weeks to show that the DOJ's the own evidence they gave us in discovery, had disproved every single allegation they made in their indictment against me.
Well, how long did it take you to get discovery from June until when?
Yeah, until September. There was a continuance because she was.
Okay, so you're getting discovery. Then in September, what happens September 24?
Yeah, in September of 2024, the first indictment falls apart because all of it was fabricated. Right? Remember how I was telling you that the TCH chief of surgery, Larry Ollier, he was their star witness. He gave them all this false testimony about, right? He's never met me. He's the worst possible witness, right? But he's the witness they go to. And granted, his wife is a radical transgender and abortion activist, right? There's obviously a reason for him to try to put me behind bars. So he gives the DOJ FBI agents information that I believe he knew was false. That's what I believe. And I believe that there's a paper trail showing that. We dismantled the first indictment. It's all proven to be
So when you say the first indictment went away, did the U.S. attorney agree that the first indictment should go away?
Yeah. Tina Ansari had to scrap the first indictment and then get a second indictment. And during this time, too, we find out that Tina Ansari is practicing with a suspended license.
I think you can do that at the U.S. attorneys, right? I mean, you're allowed or not?
No.
Okay, so
felony in
her
the state of
license was
Texas.
suspended. Why was her license suspended?
She didn't pay her bar dues, and it doesn't matter. It's like a technicality thing. She said she was going to get me on a technicality, which it was a pseudo technicality, and we got.
So indictment number 1 fails, so they indict you a second time.
Second time,
Okay.
and the second indictment is really important because that's when they get rid of the operationally meaningful language of HIPAA, right? So they get rid of HIPAA protected patient information and charges, right, to just patient information. They go from the word disclose to the word use. So there's no disclosure of information. It's only use, right?
Is that a crime to use?
No. That's the problem. That's not even in the statute. It's not a crime.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The statute says to disclose the information.
Yeah,
You're saying they use the information.
Yeah.
Well, doctors use HIPAA information all the time.
Exactly.
We do studies on patients. We do patient data. We do a meta study. I mean, we use patient data all the time.
Exactly. That's my lawyer's point. And but they also change the victims. It goes from TCH and its patients, right? Patients make sense as HIPAA, to TCH and its physicians, TCH and Baylor College of Medicine. So the indictment is no longer about protecting patient information. They're not even saying any was disclosed, right? They're saying that it was TCH and its physicians who were the ones who were harmed. But these were the ones who were lying to the public.
But how's that a criminal case?
Exactly.
I mean, at best, that sounds like a civil lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, not even a civil lawsuit because you can't even bring this in a civil case.
No, right? I mean, but if you did something and you use patient data in such a way that somehow harmed the hospital, that's the kind of thing that is a civil lawsuit. That's not a U.S. attorney issue.
And if the hospital wanted to sue me for exposing their program mutilating children, then more than happy to fight that battle.
More than happy to take that to a jury. Right. So
yeah.
So
and then also
second indictment.
And then second indictment too, they included a critical typo, and you'll appreciate this because you're a lawyer. Instead of subchapter XI, they write subchapter XL, like extra large grande nachos, right? They leave a freaking typo in the indictment, man. They didn't even proofread it. So the second indictment is dead on its face. But it's also during that time that I find out, all right, this is very fishy.
Now, where are we now time-wise?
This is October, November of 2024.
So November 24. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And I find out this is very fishy, right? In like late October 2024. I'm like, man, Tina Ansari is shameless. She's pursuing this case like doggedly, right? There's no giving up with this lady.
Well, it's not her. She's just she's the tip of the spear, but there's somebody else holding the spear.
Well, I thought that maybe there's another part of this spear. Maybe there's a financial incentive. Maybe there's a conflict of interest. Maybe with TCH and Baylor College of Medicine. So, so I start digging into her family background. I find out her brother's name is Ali Ansari. Oh man, Ali Ansari. He owns a coffee company, the biggest private label coffee company in the country. Who does he have business with? Hospitals under the TCH Baylor academic consortium, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And what happens right after Tina Ansari?
You think that would be a conflict of interest for her that she'd have to recuse herself?
Oh yeah, just hold on.
You would think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not that.
How did you make this connection? I'm just curious. The average person doesn't do this. Was this your lawyer did this?
No, I did this. I discovered this.
What made you that thought process? I deal with a lot of guys. I deal with whistleblowers 30 years, right? You don't get whistleblowers that do this usually.
In October of 2024, when the whole case was devolving into madness, I go to a gala, like this conservative event in Texas, and someone in the Texas legislature comes up to me. I've never met him before, and he's like, Dr. Haim, I've read about your case. This is crazy. You should really look into her family. I heard they're really garbage people.
So somebody tipped you off.
Well, he didn't know about the conflict.
When you say garbage people, you're talking about waste management, or are you talking about?
No, like ethically, they're garbage people.
Oh, ethically garbage. Okay.
Yeah, they're like garbage.
I'm from the Northeast. We have a lot of Italian families in waste management.
Yeah. and for the record, I have no problems against her family. Her family seemed like pretty hardworking people,
Yeah. So,
like, I think her family seemed like
she may have a real conflict of interest.
She did have, because right after she sends agents to my home, her brother, who owns a coffee company, who has business in the medical center, starts going to TCH fundraisers with the president of TCH, where they're raising $400,000 to $1 million in one night, right? For the hospital, for TCH. Yeah. And then her aunt, who's a big political activist, politician in Houston, big time Democrat, right? She gets appointed to the board of Harris Health, right? 2 months after Tina Ansari sends agents to my home. Harris Health is like the third leg in the academic stool of TCH, Baylor College of Medicine, and Harris Health. It's like the public entity.
And what's the mother's? Whose mother is this? Tina Ansari's?
Her aunt. Yeah.
Her aunt. And what's the aunt's name?
Seema Lajavardian.
She ran against. Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, Lajavardian. Yeah, and she ran against Dan Crenshaw in 2020. Right? She was known as a major TCH and Baylor fundraiser. Her uncle was on the board of TCH.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you couldn't throw a tennis ball at Tina Ansari's Thanksgiving dinner without hitting a former TCH board member, major fundraisers, or someone who had business in under the Baylor TCH academic consortium.
Here she is, Seema Lajavardian, a woman with a background in law, business, and public service, National Women's Business Council, and she's a trustee as the Harris Health System and the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know who gets appointed to the board of Harris Health the same month as Seema Lajavardian?
Who?
The lawyer who was at the first meeting with Larry Ollier on June 19th, Afshin Davis.
So it's very inbred, all of this.
Yep. An incestuous pool of corrupt actors. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens next?
Yeah.
I feel like we're in one of these podcasts where they do like real crime dramas.
Yeah. So the the second indictment falls apart. This isn't even the worst of it. Holy crap!
Okay.
This is
Oh,
this is like the light part. This is like the first level of Dante's Inferno. We're about to get to the seventh.
We're not even going down to the fifth and sixth levels. We're still at
Yeah.
level 1 and 2.
So my attorneys let the DOJ know that Tina
Right.
Ansari has all these conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest, right?
So what does she do? She withdraws from the case under a sealed motion. A sealed motion. Why does she need to withdraw from the case under a sealed motion? For the people who don't know, that's when you're interviewing a witness and you don't want that person's name to be known to the public.
Right.
So what happens is Harmeet Dillon and the Babylon Beacon.
Now that's November of 24.
Yep, November 2024.
I'm looking at you here in National Review. They did an article about her withdrawing.
Called Terminated.
November 22nd, 24. Ansari bails. Right?
It's the legal version of an Irish goodbye. Doesn't even get to say goodbye.
Right. That's funny. So that was the second indictment. So what happens to your second indictment at that point?
So the second indictment was dead in the water because they charged him with a non-existent crime, right? They included a typo in it. The second indictment falls apart, just like the first indictment. So Tina
number
Ansari's,
2 goes away. Go ahead.
And then they get a third indictment. Now Tina Ansari's gone. And now they get Jessica Feinstein, right? Who is like the apex of evil, right?
Feinstein?
Feinstein. Jessica Feinstein.
Oh, Feinstein with an F?
Yeah. She comes from the Southern District of New York, which is like the cesspool of corrupt prosecutors.
Jessica Feinstein picks up your case. The second indictment's been dropped. It's now around, December of 24?
Yeah, December 2024. And so the DOJ gets a third indictment in late November 2024.
Okay, so in November 2024, Ansari's out, Feinstein's in, indictment number 2 dies, indictment number 3 is born.
And the most vicious part of the case, which is the gag order.
Okay. Now, she's a money laundering person, expert. I'm just looking at Jessica Feinstein. Her background was financial crime. How did she get assigned to you?
She probably had such little shame that she was able to do this case. She's corrupt enough, she's evil enough that she was more than happy to take this case.
Okay. So, she did go to Stanford Law School, though.
Yeah, which is an indictment on her character. It's like once I see someone went to Stanford, and my wife went to Columbia Law School, but it's like for her, it's an indictment too. It's like she feels shame at her pedigree.
Okay, so what's number 3 indictment say?
So at this point we don't know what we're even being charged with. Because remember all the evidence they had disproved all of their allegations in the first indictment. They never gave us new evidence. But they charged me with the same crimes. So how do I know? I don't even know what they're charging me with. I have no idea. But the worst part is the only way I was able to pay for my attorneys was by speaking out. The only way I was able to expose what was going on was by publicly talking about the motion.
So is that when you open up the GoFundMe page or whatever that was?
No, that was in January 2024.
All right. Yeah. So that started in January. So now it's November 22nd, then Ansari's out. Indictment number 2 goes away. Indictment number 3 is born. The birth mother is Jessica Feinstein. She's the person of record.
Yep.
All right. And what is that indictment for exactly?
It's for obtaining information that maliciously harmed that was intended to maliciously harm TCH and its physicians.
And again, is that a crime?
No.
I don't want to sound stupid, but I'm not a criminal lawyer, but
no, and that. Yeah, so that's the thing is
is that a crime?
The enabler of this whole case was Judge David Hittner, right? Like of all the people in the courtroom, the only people who were not criminals were me and my attorney.
Judge David who?
Hittner, Hittner.
All right, Hittner. Yeah. All right, so Judge Hittner, indictment number 3, being
with
mean
the gag
to
order.
being mean to a hospital. Now, the gag order means what? Because you're out there in the media,
Yeah.
so they don't want you talking in your own defense.
No, and they file a motion for a gag order, and the justification for it was that they were worried about like cyberbullying, in that I would be able to influence a jury. But like for me, like I had never been recognized publicly. I had like a relatively small following at the time, like 20,000 people on X. That was it, right? So there was no way I can influence a jury, right? Plus, there's voir dire, right, which is like the things you do before, like a jury questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
So
Voir dire.
Yeah.
Voir dire. It's just fancy word for I'm thinking jury.
Voir dire. I don't know.
That's cute. That's cute.
So we don't think the judge is gonna bite, but he eats it up, right? It was like he was like a British aristocrat who was like looking down on a peasant, right? And he eats up the DOJ's argument for this gag order, like he was a starving
now
little
all
child.
of this going on, and your wife is working for the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah,
that's got to be for her the most awkward thing ever.
Yeah, very awkward. And we just had our first baby. We had our first baby in September.
Oh man, this poor woman. You went through she went through her pregnancy dealing with this?
Yeah, she gave birth in an emergency C-section, and I had to leave 2 hours after the baby was born to go to court for the first indictment falling apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
She gets the medal, not you. I mean, no
Yeah,
offense,
I know. That's what I'm
like,
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, women are like, little sidebar here. Women are amazing. And I say that not because I raised a whole bunch of them. I had like daughters, but they deal with all this stuff. I mean, you dealt with what you dealt with. Okay. You brought it on. You blew the whistle. God bless you. You did God's work. But your wife was a U.S. attorney. Her husband was being indicted by the U.S. attorney. She's carrying your baby, has a pregnancy, has an emergency C-section, all while the DOJ is sending armed men to your door, knocking on your door, and they keep dreaming up different charges to charge you with because they just want to shut you up at the end of the day, right? Now, Texas had stopped doing these procedures, right? What happened to the program while all this is going on?
Very, very interesting question, because so the day after my first arraignment in June of 2024, the other whistleblower speaks out using her real name. And she alleges that TCH not only continued the program, right, but that they were using false diagnosis codes to bill for it in order to bypass SB 14. And you'll appreciate
who's paying, the federal government or the state? Is it a Medicaid fraud at that point?
Well, the allegation is that Medicaid. She said that they were, and in Texas, it's always been illegal to use Medicaid for these interventions, always.
So now where are we time-wise?
Yeah, so this is December 2024, right? The judge, he issues a de facto gag order in a hearing on December 3rd, where he doesn't grant the gag order, right? Because he would become the laughing stock of the legal world, right? To gag someone like me who's never been recognized publicly is totally insane, right? But he wants to silence me, so he doesn't deny the gag order. He just leaves it as an open threat. What he does is he says, I'm going to send you to jail if you continue similar conduct, but doesn't define what similar conduct was. And by this point, we were $1 million in legal debt, right? So we had no option to appeal it. We had nothing we can do legally. So for the next month and a half, like, I'm effectively silenced. So, because Trump just got elected, right? I'm thinking like, all right, they have to drop this case. They have to. And like, we were scheduled to go to court to trial in February.
Wait,
right?
This is indictment number 3, though. You said you had 4 indictments.
Three indictments.
This is number 3.
Yeah.
And a gag order. Almost.
And a de facto gag order.
Yeah, de facto gag orders. And what did they threaten you with? Putting you in jail if you violate the judge's order? Do you want a little sidebar here? I went to solitary confinement for defying a judge's order. 3 days and 3 nights. So you're going to like this story. Real quick. I'll give you all the... You got time? I'll give you time.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm doing an investigation, and I'm doing tape recordings back before digital is how long ago it was. And it's against a major company in New Jersey. And they had a big presence in the state. When I'm doing an investigation, I'm wearing a wire, two sets. I always had a backup. And I gave half the tapes to the U.S. Attorney's Office because I was developing the case. And then the other half I had sitting in my house. The judge gets wind that I'm doing an undercover investigation. This is before I was a lawyer when I could do investigations. I'm a medical doc at that point. So he calls me into court Monday morning. And I remember the Sunday night saying to my daughter, Daddy's going to jail tomorrow. I just want to prepare you in case it's in the newspapers, Daddy's going to jail. And she says, why? And I said, because sometimes men that wear black robes aren't nice men. So go in the next day, and the judge says to me, I want the tapes. And I said, I can't give you the tapes. I'll give them to you when I make copies, but I need a few days to make copies. He says, no, I want the tapes now. I want everything you have. And I said, why do you want the tapes, Your Honor? I said, what possible reason could a state court judge want for these tapes other than to kill the investigation, and to stop my investigation? Long story short, he puts me illegally, by the way, in solitary confinement in a state prison in New Jersey for civil detainment, a violation of just a contempt of court. So I go in the first day, give me a brown paper bag with a bologna sandwich and an orange. And I'm a Messianic Christian. Oh, and a little tube of toothpaste and a toothbrush, little tiny toothbrush. So solitary confinement, you're locked in 23 out of 24, steel door, just like the movies, with a little flap in the door. They pass the sandwich in, right? So I rip we have to do something with our hands, right? Medical docs, we got to be creative. So I ripped the paper bag into strips, and I put a Star of David up on the wall inside my door, and inside I put a little crucifix, Star of David. The guard comes in, he's a kid in his 20s, and he just says to me, take that down. You can't have anything on the walls. And I'm like, all right, I took it down. And they check on you like every 18 hours or so. So he leaves. 18 hours goes by. Of course, I put it right back up as soon as he walked out. He comes in again, he says to me, a little angry this time, I told you to take that down. You can't have anything on the walls. Again, he leaves. I pull it down. He leaves. I put it right back up again, right? You're not the only stubborn one, right? So now, third time he comes in. Now I'm there 2 days, 2.5 days at this point. And he gets really angry. Take that down. And I just said, no. I just thought about it for a second. I said, no. And he says, what do you mean, no? I said, I'm already in solitary confinement.
Yeah,
what else?
What can you do?
What can you do to me at this point? And I said, and let me tell you something else, son. I said, I want you to think about this one. We're both going to die one day. I'm going to die. You're going to die. Everybody here, we're all going to die one day. And you know what happens when you die? I said, you die, your soul goes to heaven. You go to heaven, and there's the gates of heaven. And Jesus is going to be standing at that door. I can explain to him why I put this up on the wall. Can you explain to him why you made me take it down? And he looks at me, and all the authority drains from his body. And he just collapsed, like literally emotionally collapsed, and just looked at me with this blank stare, left, didn't make me take it down, never came back to check on it, never told me to take it down again. When you're right, and you have the authority of being righteous, you can stand to anything. I mean, here you were against everybody, right? Against the power of the Department of Justice. And these are powerful guys. I mean, we do a lot of cases with DOJ. There's a lot of great people at DOJ. What happened to you really shouldn't have happened to anybody. And that isn't a criminal thing, right? It's a debate. You can have the debate about what to do with kids, not to do. But to criminalize and push on you the way they did just seems like really overbearing and wrong. And but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You had a lot to lose too as a medical doc. I mean, did they come after your license? What did the medical? I'm just curious. Sidebar. What did the Texas Medical Board say about all this?
They tried.
Did they sanction you? Did somebody file a complaint against you?
They knew they couldn't. I mean, they could try, but they were barking up the wrong tree.
Does the medical board have a rule against these procedures? I mean, the
No,
doctors who are doing them,
well, now they do because now it's illegal in Texas.
it's illegal in Texas.
Yeah.
Okay, so back then, so nobody ever brought these doctors in front of a medical board.
Well, we'll see how that plays out.
Okay.
I have
So what
reason to
happens?
believe
It's
that.
December 3rd, 24. What's happening?
Yeah, so I'm silenced from this de facto gag order, right? We're $1 million in debt. And, this is the most difficult time of my life, right? Because it's like the only thing I had to fight back was by speaking out, right? And they took that away from me. So then January 20th comes along and Trump gets inaugurated. And, he signs the weaponization order on January 20th, ending the weaponization of the DOJ. But behind the scenes, the DOJ, Jessica Feinstein, the Southern District of Texas, they are escalating the case towards trial. And like every day they're escalating is another $50,000, right? So, and this is in direct contradiction to what the DOJ should be doing, which they should drop this case on January 20th. So on January 22nd, I speak out, right, on X. And I call out the DOJ. I call out the acting U.S. attorney, Jennifer
On
Lowry.
January 20th.
22nd, sorry.
22nd, so 2 days after Trump.
Yeah. After the DOJ was escalating it, right after his weaponization executive order. So they were doing it directly the opposite of what they should have been doing, right? So I speak out on January 22nd, and in defiance of the judge's corrupt de facto gag order. And then on the 23rd, that's when things really kind of devolved. This is like the final battle between like me and this corrupt judge, because I entered a game of chicken with the judge and I wasn't going to back down. So that evening, right, we're trying to get hold of Main Justice in DC, the people who just took over, because the Southern District of Texas was not going to dismiss this case, right? So we had to try to get a hold of the people in charge to offer guidance to the Southern District to tell them, like, you have to dismiss this case with prejudice. But that was a long shot, right? And on the other side of it, on the evening of the 23rd, my attorneys tell me that Judge Hittner is going to send me to jail the next day. He's going to issue an arrest warrant, just like you, right? But he's also going to move my trial up to that Monday.
Oh my God, this guy! You can't get murderers go to trial for years, and they're going to move you up to the Monday.
And the condition to avoid this was that if I signed a pretrial diversion agreement with the government, right? But what was that pretrial diversion agreement, right? It was that I couldn't disparage the government or the prosecutors, and I couldn't sue the government, and I couldn't disparage TCH or Baylor. But also no one in my family could disparage the government, TCH, or Baylor. And that was meant for my wife, because my wife had spoken out after the gag order.
Well, yeah, because your wife's been through it. She also is a U.S. attorney herself. Look, anybody who loves law and order has to, this makes you sick seeing stuff like this. There's such an abuse of authority. It's terrible.
So the judge was extorting me in order to get this case off of his docket, because he probably was too embarrassed by that point, because
the judge was incentivizing you to clear his docket for judicial efficiency.
Yeah, so he was getting me to like as a defendant, I have certain rights. Like I can't just be extorted by a judge to sign agreements with the DOJ. That's not how it works. I have my rights as a criminal defendant.
Well, it is how it works, though. But it can work like that. That's what people do. And I'm not defending anybody. I'm just telling you from their point of view, they're trying to get judicial efficiency. From your point of view, it's extortion. And look, I'm on your side here. But
it's like what they do in Sierra Leone or the Congo.
But it seems
Liberia.
like you're winning at this point. Look, you're just at the precipice at this point where things are about to turn for you. You've got a new government in place. obviously you're on the right side of the thinking of the new government. You're on God's side. I hate to sound crazy, but I believe that 100% you're on God's corner. So,
but in that moment, it didn't seem like it, because
you seemed alone, right?
Oh yeah, of course, because we're going to trial in February, right? If we were to go to trial with this judge, we know that
you would have lost.
Yeah, of course, because he would have taken out all of my defenses in the motions.
Right. You would have lost. They would have stacked the deck against you and you lose. Right.
And that's how it works. So it's like, no, like I was like, by that point, there was no argument my lawyers could make. I had to fight for myself, you know?
Yeah,
and that's
got to fight for your life.
And then, so that day on January 23rd, my attorneys were also on the phone with Maine Justice, right? And by God's grace, the next morning, against all odds, they had issued guidance to the Southern District of Texas to dismiss the case with prejudice. And
when was this?
January 24th, 2025. And, you know, like, so I signed that pretrial diversion agreement, right?
Yeah, no, you didn't. You never signed it, right?
No, I didn't, because I was operating the next day. I had to take care of my patients, you know?
Okay, so you signed the pretrial diversion agreement.
But the Maine Justice, they were like the Hail Mary, right? The conditions from that pretrial diversion agreement didn't go.
So it never went into effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was going to violate it that Monday because it was it was signed under duress, you know.
But how do you ever get to the fourth indictment?
There was only 3 indictments.
Only 3 indictments. Okay, so there's no fourth indictment. So Baruch Hashem, what happens? God is great, right?
Yeah. So January 24th, the case gets dismissed. So me and the judge, we enter this epic game, like this game of chicken, right? And
wait, the case gets tossed on the 24th, but you signed. When did you sign the diversion agreement? So what happens in that case?
So they were saying if the judge was saying if the pretrial diversion agreement is not on my desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow on the 24th, he's going to jail. So we just kind of kept that in the back pocket. But I was going to violate it that Monday. Yeah. But then DC came through, right? DC.
Now, what happens to the diversion agreement? You've signed it now, but then the case gets tossed.
It was never codified. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, because Maine Justice comes in 9 a.m. the next morning. Yeah.
And what's happened since?
Yeah, so like that weekend, you know, I'm invited by Josh Hawley to go to the State of the Union, you know.
I think I read that online.
Yeah. So it's like the day, like, you know, everything culminates in like this big fight between me and the judge, and we win, right, on January 24th, 2025. And like I finish operating, and then, like we're talking to everyone. It's like that day was crazy. It was hectic because so much was going on. Reporters were calling, and because, people were hearing that I was going to jail the next day. So, I was on the phone with a reporter from the Daily Wire, and then all of a sudden I just hear my wife scream, and then I thought it was maybe the police were there, but then she comes in and she's smiling and, she's crying, and then, find out that the case is dismissed with prejudice. So.
My God. I mean, seriously, what you've been through. Whatever happened with Tina Ansari? What happened there? She's
still working there.
She still works in what is the southern? Which district in Texas?
The Southern District of Texas, because
Texas.
Yeah, the people who are protecting her are actually like the pseudo conservatives, who are in that office, and because there was like the executive AUSA, right, which is one of the highest level positions in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then the criminal chief, both of them were conservative guys, quote unquote conservative guys. Their names were John Pearson and Ted Imperato. But these guys are snakes, absolute snakes, because they had led everyone to believe that they were bypassed, right, in the chain of command. But I believe that's baloney, right? I think these guys signed off on everything. So, and they're the ones who are protecting Tina right now.
Yeah, who knows where all that ends up? I mean, you have to just grab onto what you did. You prevailed, man. And, let go of the, what's the word I'm looking here for? I'm not saying that what they did was right. It's not. But you've got a wife and a baby, and your wife stood by you, man. She deserves a lot of the credit here. I mean, what you did was, you never would have been able to survive this without that woman.
No.
I mean, and you know, the really blessed thing about all this is it makes you super strong, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what like imagine your kid grows up, has a bad day at school, or she has a fight with one of the teachers. That's nothing on the scale of what you've been through. I have the same relationship with my wife. I did undercover investigations. I've been doing this 30 years. I banged heads with some people, but people at the U.S. Attorney's Office too. And I was on their side. You imagine you're on the other side,
Yeah. But, the people have to pay for what they've done, And it's like,
do they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mean that in a bad way, Ethan, but I'm saying, do they? You know how many bad people there are in the world that never pay for what they did?
Yeah.
Is it,
but that's a problem, is that like the reason things got to this point is because people didn't follow through with justice, right? Because they said, oh, let bygones be bygones, like, let me just move on. Now is a time to salt the earth with the bones of our enemies.
I think you're the reincarnation of an ancient Israeli warrior, right? Like every day, my wife and I do Bible study. We do it every day religiously, and it's a program. And we're cycling through the Bible for like the third or fourth time, and you get to the Book of Chronicles and the Book of Kings, and like all these warriors, these Israeli warriors, and then they come up against it, and you don't look the type. I mean, you don't look like a tough guy. You look like a nice guy. But I always tell my whistleblowers, I said, the most powerful word in the English language, and I said, as a whistleblower, I want you to learn this word. They go, what is it? What is it? I said, no. When they come to you to settle the case, say no. If I tell you don't do it, don't do it. Just listen to me. I'll tell you when and how. But everyone's going to come to you with every excuse in the world why you should bail on this. Just say no. Just say no, and so what happened? So what happened now? So Trump's in, the world is all good again. They tossed this case. There's a lot of people at the DOJ that are bruised and battered. You better not ever do anything wrong because they got, don't break any laws in Texas. Don't break any federal laws.
Good thing I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Amen, brother. So what happens? Like, does your wife ever feel the retribution? Does anybody ever like hold this against her? Does she get like firewalled a little bit from like certain cases?
Actually not. There was a lot of awkwardness, but she took the deferred resignation from the Department of Justice because they went to a 5-day in-person work week, and we just had our baby.
Yeah, so that's hard. She wants to be a mom.
My wife wants to be a mom. And
yeah. Oh, God bless her. So she's not working at a firm right now? She's at home?
No. She's actually possibly looking at other opportunities in the Texas AG's office, ironically enough.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I would think Ken Paxton would be very friendly to your wife in the sense that because it's your wife, if he has an opening in the AG's office, why wouldn't he want somebody like that?
Yeah. And, her credentials stand on their own. She's brilliant. She's so dang smart.
Oh, and where did she go to law school?
Columbia. And
that's right. You
Georgetown
said.
undergrad, and she did international arbitration.
Wow.
So
Georgetown undergrad. She's a Hoya.
Yeah.
I went to Georgetown Medical. So.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah. So now, like, what is life like? I mean, did you catch flack at the hospital? I'm curious. Like, what are the people at the hospital? What are the other doctors at the hospital saying to you? I'm curious.
It's funny because I work in a really, really small town. Conservative.
What is it, Greenville or something?
Greenville, yeah.
Yeah, Greenville.
So it's a county hospital. So the hospital board is elected by the county.
I can't believe people in Greenville, Texas are for gender mutilation of kids. I can't believe it.
So they stood behind me. I mean, in the middle of the case, September, October, November, I was in the highest percentile for robotic surgeons in the entire country in terms of volume.
Wow.
Yeah, like my first year from October 2023 to October 2024, while all this was going on, I did like 500 cases.
500 cases.
That's a lot.
Oh, I know. I interned in general surgery at Lenox Hill. Yeah, no, I used to love the OR. If I was going to do anything else, I would have been a surgeon, but I just loved it. There was something about it that I loved. I was busy it's just something about, I don't know. It's real, right? I mean, I could never do psychiatry. Like I would just tell everybody just to be quiet and get on with your life.
Yeah. Get over it,
Right, get over it. But surgery is so real,
Yeah, it's physical problems. You fix mechanical issues. Yeah.
Now, are you religious at all? I mean, you're Jewish, right?
Yeah. No. And I believe every step of the way was guided by God, by divine providence. Every step of the way.
Amen. Are you familiar with the Himnon Valley? Back in ancient times, Israel fell astray and they started sacrificing their children in the Himnon Valley. And God said, if you keep doing this, I'm going to punish you. And, they estimate that they maybe killed 50 or 60, 80,000 of their own kids, sacrificing to the god Baal. Israel many times over the centuries fell into a place where they got away from the one true God, and then God punished them. And that was killing 50 or 80,000. We've done 60 million abortions in the United States, and this concept, and it's funny. I have family in Italy. I'm Italian, and my cousin's a surgeon, maxillofacial surgeon in Italy. And when I go there, there's all these docs and all this, and I'll tell them, this stuff doesn't go. They don't read about this stuff over in Europe because they're afraid. The Italians, at least, are afraid of the American culture coming to their country. They don't want it. And when I tell her, I say, do you know that they operate on children and that they're changing their sexes from male to female and female to male? And she's going, no. And she's like, look at me. And I have to show her on my iPhone that, I'm not lying. This is the thing. And she's going, no, who would do this? That's horrible. She's saying, it's like, and all the doctors are looking and they're all surgeons. They're saying, who would do such a terrible thing? You have to be crazy to do that. I said, this is what they do. What do you think is behind it? I'm just curious. I mean, you're a religious man.
Yeah.
Let's just go off the doctor thing. We're both smart guys, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's
what do you really think's behind it all?
It's like demonic forces where
Thank
people
you.
believe.
Amen, brother. You said it.
Yeah. I mean, once I saw a cross-dressing man dressed as a demon giving a child a lap dance, I was like, yeah, devils are real. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. I speak to Jews and Christians, because that's where my sweet spot. I have one of my best friends is a Rebbe for the Chabad, so he's Hasidic. And if you say to the average person, like if you're at a cocktail party in Texas and you talk about a demon, I believe in demons, right? They're going to look at you like you're crazy. But if you say, well, are you Jewish? And you say, well, I'm Jewish, yes. Well, when the angel came to Daniel in the lion's den, what did he say to him? He said, I'm sorry I'm late. I was dealing with the demon of Parsus, Parsus, which is Persia, which is Syria, which is Iran and Iraq. So if you believe in Daniel, you say, do you believe in Daniel the prophet? Oh, sure I do. Well, he spoke to an angel who told him about demons. And if you're talking to a Christian, you say, do you believe in demons? And they'll say, nah, you don't really believe in demons. Do you believe in Jesus? So they say, oh, yeah, Jesus. Well, I worship Jesus. But say he spoke to demons. So either Jesus was real and demons are real, or Jesus was out of his mind and demons are fictitious beings. But, I came up, I'm a doc now 40 years. And if you had said to us even 20 years ago, that somebody would be doing this in a hospital like Houston, and they would take a child, a little boy, and transgender him and castrate a boy. I mean, even the Nazis didn't do this.
Even the
Hitler
Nazis
didn't do
tried
this.
to conceal it. They didn't advertise it.
Right. Like, think about this. You say, oh, the Nazis, they killed, 12 million people, 6 million Jews. They hated Jews. They did. And they took little kids and they put them in the gas chambers and they killed them. That's terrible. But they didn't transgender them first. Even the Nazis in their worst moments didn't conceive of something so horrific.
Yeah, like when they were sterilizing young girls, they knew that what they were doing was wrong because they tried to conceal it.
And, so, Ethan, I really believe, God bless you. You did a wonderful thing. But you're a young man. Can I ask how old you are? 35. You got your whole life ahead of you, right? What's next? What's next in your life? I mean, you're doing surgery. You're in Greenville, Texas. I hope the people in Greenville appreciate that they have a really blessed human being amongst them, okay? Because I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of the DOJ, and that is not some place you want to be, right? Ever, ever, ever. And, I work a lot with it. I do have a lot of cases in front of the DOJ. I got a lot of respect for the DOJ. That was not their shining moment, what they did to you. And what I don't get is why. I mean, if it's not demonic, then what is it?
I think it's demonic.
It has to be, right? I mean,
yeah, because it's like the thing I know why it's so evil. This is manifestly evil. It's because never in a million years would I want the prosecutors who came after me. I would never want them to go through what I went through, right? It fears me to even think that they would have to go through something I went through. I would never want them to go through that. And it's like to put me through all this, they have to see me as inhuman. They have to see me as a dog, right? As someone who's not worthy of the rule of law, right? Someone who, because think about actually actively sending someone to prison who's innocent for 10 years, and that person's innocent.
Sending someone to prison so you could sending one doctor to prison, which would have taken your license and taken everything you ever worked for, to protect another doctor who's taking children and injuring them.
And sterilizing
transgendering them.
Yeah.
Do you know what Jesus said about people who affect children? You may not know this, and if you know it, you've ever heard
cast them out into the water with a...
Well, no. He said that it's better... Now, have you ever seen a millstone? You know what a millstone is? It's a gigantic stone, like 5 times the size of a truck tire, and it's all made out of stone. It's a wheel. And you use it to grind, wheat husks and all that, make bread and grain. And he said, better a millstone is hung around your neck for the rest of eternity than what my Father has planned for you in heaven. Meaning the worst offenses that you can commit. Now, this guy's Messiah. So you may not agree that he's Messiah, but, that's fine. But imagine for a moment that he was and is. And he's saying, by the way, you're a murderer. I forgive you. No problem. You're an adulteress and they're stoning you to death. I'm stopping that. You can't do that. God's got to judge that. But then he says, you hurt a child? You can't even imagine how bad it's going to be for you if you hurt a child. And that's what I don't get, man. I became a doctor to help people, not to hurt them. I don't know one person that I went to medical school with that would intentionally hurt anybody, let alone a child. Who does this? And how do you make it a policy? I just don't get it, and I've had a lot of, the guys that I work with are a lot of Democrats, big Democratic donors and all that nonsense. And they just say to me, Joe, I don't get it. Donald Trump, you're a nice guy, Joe. How can you support a maniac like that? How can evangelical Christians, and they say that because they know I'm evangelical. They say, how can evangelical Christians support Donald Trump? I said, how can you support transgendering a child? I said, that's a line in the sand for us. Don't you get it? And then he says, oh, we never should have gone there because then we lost the election. All they think of every time they talk, it's about winning and losing elections. It's not about what's right and wrong. It's just wrong. You don't need to You don't need a politician or a poll to tell me that a little boy walks in the room and I'm going to cut his penis off and cut his testicles off, and this kid is 7 years old and I'm going to turn him into a woman because he says so. He's 7 years old. This kid can't smoke a cigarette. He can't, this is a child. This is a baby. We're supposed to protect our babies. Who does this to people?
Demonic forces.
It has to be demonic, right? Do you believe that?
I mean that's legitimately what I believe. Yeah.
And this is the crazy part. I don't know. I didn't grow up talking, the average person, like I deal with all these really high-end lawyers, right? I mean, very wealthy guys. And, and you say to them, could you, here's the knife. You think it's so smart. I went to law school and they were talking about late stage abortion, how it's supposed to be. It's fine to do a late stage abortion. I said, I'm going to bring in a video of a late stage abortion because I was a medical doc when I went to law school. And I said to these kids, I said, if you can't even sit through a video and watch one, but you expect me to do one? Because then they wanted to pass these laws that unless you do what they say, you can't practice medicine. So if I was a medical doc, for example, and I say, I'm not going to refer you to an abortionist, I will not give you that referral. I'll send you to an abortion counseling center so that you don't get the abortion. I'll do that, but I can't, my conscience won't let me do that. They want to yank your license. I mean, states like California, they want to say that if you come out against gender-affirming care, quote unquote, if you come out against abortion, then you shouldn't have a license. You're not fit to practice medicine. Like, how did we get to that place, man? And there's a good book out. You should read. I'm going to send you a copy. It's called Return of the Gods, and it's by my pastor, actually, and I'm not giving him a shameless plug here, but his name is Jonathan Cahn. There's 6 New York Times best-selling books. And his theory is simple. All of the stuff we're seeing, stuff like transgendering, transsexuality, all of it is very ancient. It's not progressive. It's the most ancient thing you can do. Changing the gender from male to female and female to male is an ancient belief system that predated that in the days of Moses and Pharaoh. So when Moses and the Jews were running, practicing one God and faith in one God, that was radical. The world around them were steeped in all this kind of nonsense. And the only reason why we forgot that is because after Jesus's life and then modern day, monotheism, Christianity and Judaism, and to some degree Islam, right, because they believe in this one God and the prophets and all, that other stuff got pushed away. But that was the way of the world. What you found in Texas was really the percolation of an ancient evil come back. And, we believe anyway that God is eternal and that the demons are eternal too. And it's funny because if people will look at me and say, well, you guy's out of his mind. Well, I have a medical degree and a law degree, so I'm not that out of my mind, right? I have a medical license and a law license. And, if I see a duck walking down the street, painted red, white, and blue, and he's playing a little horn, he's got a bugle sticking out of his butt, I'm going to say there's a duck walking down the street with a bugle sticking out of his butt. I may sound insane, but I'm going to call it the way I see it. Transgendering a child is evil, and it shouldn't be. And it's really crazy. If you want to reaffirm that you're normal, go to Europe and just talk to doctors and tell them the story of what they're doing, what they were doing in Texas. And they won't believe you. They'll say you're lying. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that. And then you show them, and then look at the reaction. Because you got to remind yourself sometimes, right? Don't you have to remind yourself that you're the normal one?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like one of those things where I think it's like I'm living in a fantasy world, like a nightmare. Like, are we really even having this conversation? It's like, what a crazy conversation to have.
Well, I guess you're still paying off the legal bill. So where do people go to support you? Like, let's talk that through, because I want to make sure you get your
They can
your
go
day
to
here.
givesendgo.com/Texas_whistleblower.
Wait, that's a lot. Let's take that one more time slowly. Give, send, go.
Yeah, givesendgo.com and then /Texas
/Texas.
Yeah, _whistleblower.
All of that. Okay. Give, send, go. Now, if I just do give, send, go, and I Google your name, won't that pop up too?
First thing that'll pop up.
Right. Haim. 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 Eithan Haim. Baruch Hashem, brother, right? God is great. Isn't he great?
Yeah.
Look at you. They knocked on the wrong door when they knocked on your door.
That's what I said. They knocked on the wrong door. Yeah.
And you know what? Don't you think sometimes at night when you're just thinking this through? I have a lot of respect for cops and law enforcement. I do. I mean, I love them. I think I think you need, these marshals to go out and do these, catch the bad guys, right? They go out and they grab these guys that are MS-13 guys and rapists and gangsters and all this stuff. And these guys are dangerous, and that's a rough job. But after they knock on your door, and then you answer the door, and then when they go home and they really figure out what it was they were enforcing, don't they have some moment where they say to themselves, I should have just said no? I mean, you don't have to. That's what I never understood, because these guys are my heroes. But how can a hero, when he gets this subpoena, this indictment, he says, wait, what are we knocking on? The next guy we're knocking on the door. What is he? He's a medical doc. Okay, so he must be some criminal, did Medicare fraud or did something. Well, wait a second. No, he's HIPAA violation. What's HIPAA? And then they say, wait a second. Don't they stop at one point and say, I'm not doing this. Like, I just don't want to do this. I'm not going to fight to protect Texas hospital, some hospital in Texas, from transgendering kids. I don't want to be in that. Do you really think for a moment that these federal officers who knocked on your door support transgendering?
Not in a million years.
Right. So why would they do it? Don't you say to yourself, I don't know, just because somebody orders you to do something, it's not enough reason to do it. I'm sorry. I mean, look at you, right? You risked everything you trained for, everything you spent your whole life. I don't know about you. I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was 5. Right? I volunteered all over Central America, South America. I've been in Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, done all those things. And I can't imagine, I've seen thousands of children, I couldn't imagine hurting one like that. It's just the worst treatment, the worst punishments in hell are reserved. And this came from Messiah. The worst punishments in hell are reserved for you. So who at Texas Hospital thinks this is a good idea? That's what I don't get. Unbelievable, right? Well, listen, brother, I'm a big fan. I'm humbled just to speak to you. Truly, I'm 30 years in this game, and I haven't met a lot of guys like you.
I appreciate that.
And you didn't do it to make millions of dollars. I mean, the people I work with, they end up making tens of millions of dollars for themselves because they're whistleblowers. You did it just because it's the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah. It's the worst grift in all time because we're like $1 million in debt.
Yeah, well,
we'll pay it off over time.
Give, send, go, and HAIM. If I Google those terms, it'll pop up and you'll get money. God bless you, brother. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Tonight's Friday night. Shabbat Shalom. And maybe we'll talk again. I'd love to meet you one day. I come to Texas a lot. Where's Greenfield? Where is that near? What big town?
Just east of Dallas.
East of Dallas. Okay.
Yeah,
I know a lot of lawyers in Dallas. And we have a major case coming down in Texas, attorney general case. I don't want to mention it yet, but it's going to be a litigation case. Ken Paxton's involved. Is it Ken Paxton? Or what's Paxton's first name?
Oh, Ken.
Is it Ken Paxton?
Ken Paxton, yeah.
Okay, yeah. He's running for Senate. Mm-hmm. So go Ken Paxton. Listen, all right. You have a wonderful evening. Give my best to your wife. I'd love to meet her one of these days. She sounds like a really strong lady. You married the right woman.
Yeah, no, she's a wonder.
God bless you, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.